Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this financial literacy workshop, Know Your Money. This workshop is conducted by Proletarian Power, a not-for-profit entity. Proletarian Power is primarily into economic research with public interest as a main focus. Purpose of this workshop is to help the layman and non-finance people to understand the basics of personal finance. We want to educate such people by explaining different key financial terms in a simple language. After attending this workshop, we expect you to understand and appreciate what your investment advisor is saying. A word of caution. This workshop is general in nature and we want you to understand that each individual is different in terms of life cycle stage, risk profile, future goals, etc. So you better consult a qualified investment advisor before finalizing your investment plans. Now let us get into the subject. 5 phases of finance. Finance basically has 5 phases or 5 aspects to it. They are income, expenditure, assets, liabilities and liquidity. As you can see in the image, income and expenditure are mutually opposites. Similarly, assets and liabilities are mutually opposites. Liquidity is an additional dimension. While income and expenditure are measured over a period of time, usually an year, assets and liabilities are statements of their status as on a particular date. Let us look at each one of them in detail. First item is income. What is income? In simple terms, income is an inflow of money which need not be returned. There are multiple ways one can earn money. Few common examples are salary, income from profession, profit from business, rents received, dividends from shares or mutual funds, and so on. Income can be divided into 2 categories. One is active income and another is passive income. Good understanding of them goes a long way in one's investment planning. Let us look at them closely. 1. Active income is also called primary income or basic income. Active income is the one which the individual earns by engaging in a particular income-generating activity. This income-generating activity generally takes the maximum amount of time, energy, and other resources of the individual. This income usually stops the moment the individual stops working for it. Typical examples of such income are salary from service, income from business or from profession, etc. 2. On the other hand, passive income is the income which one earns without or with minimum involvement. Typical examples are dividends from shares or mutual funds, interest on fixed deposits, rental income from property, royalty, etc. Ideally, one should strive to build multiple sources of passive income over a period of time through proper planning. You might have heard experts saying, not only you should work for money but also make sure that your money works for you. That is a powerful statement. Indeed, it is worth remembering and worth following. Next item on our agenda is expenditure. Expenditure is exactly opposite of income. Expenditure either leads to or results in outflow of cash or creates a liability which is nothing but future outflow. Expenditure can be divided into basic expenditure, discretionary expenditure, aspirational expenditure, and so on. Basic expenditure, which is also known as essential expenditure, is the one that an individual spends to fulfill very basic needs like food, shelter, healthcare, etc., as per one's chosen standard of living. Usually there isn't much scope to reduce it. On the other hand, the discretionary expenditure is the one, as the very name suggests, which can be reduced or postponed if there are other pressing priorities. Aspirational expenditure is yet another kind of expenditure. Aspirational expenditure is mostly unnecessary and wasteful. People usually indulge in such expenditure for ego boosting and for show-off. If one has a comfortable surplus and one's future needs are well taken care of, then maybe one can splurge some money on these things. But generally speaking, people with such tendencies need to be careful. Relationship between income, expenditure, and investment. Now, before proceeding further, we better understand the relationship between income, expenditure, and investments. This relationship can be summarized with this formula: income minus expenditure equal to surplus or investment. Ideally, one's expenditure should not exceed one's income. Otherwise, one gets into a deficit which cannot be sustained for too long. The surplus, that is the income left after meeting the expenditure, needs to be channeled into the right kind of investments. This is called investment planning. This is a very crucial step. This is a fairly complex job and generally calls for professional help. Investment advisors help you too. Build a portfolio based on many factors like your risk profile, commitments, future needs, etc., on one hand, and prevailing macroeconomic environment on the other hand. This topic requires an elaborate discussion. For the sake of brevity, we will not go into details here. Maybe we will come up with a separate video on this subject later. Here, one may wonder how much to spend and how much to save and invest. When to press that stop button? There are no hard and fast rules. Each individual is a different case. One should have a balance between enjoying life now and securing the future and meeting life goals. How much of what varies from person to person? Our advice is don't go to extremes. Next item on our agenda is assets. What is an asset? Asset can be defined as a resource that gives an enduring benefit over a period of time. That means it not only lasts for a very long period of time, say 10, 15 or 20 years, but also generates income throughout its lifetime. Assets can be divided into two categories: appreciating assets and depreciating assets. Popular examples of appreciating assets are real estate, gold, shares, mutual funds, and popular examples of depreciating assets are automobiles, electronic gadgets, and so on. Both are necessary. Appreciating assets either generate additional streams of income or may simply appreciate in value over a period of time, or may sometimes give both, some income and some appreciation. Depreciating assets, on the other hand, depreciate over a period of time but provide comfort and convenience. One should have a right mix of both appreciating assets and depreciating assets. What is the right mix? Again, it varies from person to person. Let us move on to the next item, that is liabilities. Liabilities, as already stated, are opposite to assets. Liability simply means one owes money to someone like a bank. Liabilities can be long-term or short-term. Typical example for long-term liabilities are housing loan, education loan, etc. And typical examples of short-term liabilities are personal loan, credit card loan, or loans incurred for buying consumer durable, etc. While borrowing money, one should be extremely careful to avoid asset-liability mismatch. Asset-liability mismatch arises when one uses short-term funds to purchase long-term assets. Typical example of such an asset-liability mismatch could be taking a personal loan to buy a piece of land. Asset-liability mismatch can play havoc with one's finances even when the individual is financially solvent. Further, as a thumb rule, borrowing money to purchase an appreciating asset is a good idea, but not to purchase a depreciating asset. However, currently we observe that people are encouraged to borrow and buy that fancy home theater or that higher-end super expensive smartphone, which are depreciating assets. We also see people getting addicted to buying everything on EMIs. This, according to us, is financial indiscipline. Similarly, borrowing money to fund your dream vacation abroad is reckless. These things can have serious consequences. Also, one should keep an eye on one's net worth is assets minus liabilities. Assets should always be in excess of liabilities. Otherwise, one becomes insolvent and unbankable. The next aspect of finance is liquidity. Liquidity simply means how quickly an asset can be converted into cash. The shorter the time it takes, the more liquid the asset is, and conversely, the longer the time it takes, the lesser the asset's liquidity is. Well-structured investment portfolio ensures that the individual remains adequately liquid all the time. Investors should neither be excessively liquid nor absolutely illiquid. Excessively liquid means you may be missing out on investment opportunities, and absolutely illiquid means you are taking the risk of defaulting on commitments. Both are bad. The risk-return liquidity relationship. Having understood the basics of finance, now, let us look at another important principle that governs investment planning. That is, risk-return liquidity relationship. Every investment decision is influenced by this relationship. Let us look at this closely. An investment that bears greater risk usually gives a higher return. Conversely, lower the risk usually lower the return. Thus, risk and return are positively correlated. For example, a term deposit receipt with a commercial bank, supposed to be a less risky product, barely earns enough to cover inflation most of the time. On the other hand, a relatively risky product, say, a large cap-oriented mutual fund, is likely to give a higher return over a period of time. Of course, it may not be so simple and straight in the real world. But as a principle, we can say, higher the risk, higher the return. When it comes to liquidity, the relationship is higher the liquidity, lower the risk, and thus lower the return. Thus, we can summarize this relationship with the statement: investing is all about optimizing the risk-return liquidity matrix. Some important concepts. Now let us try to understand some important concepts related to finance and investments. First one is inflation. What is inflation? You might have heard your grandparents saying many times that we used to get so much stuff for so little amount when we were young. This is the effect of inflation. Inflation simply means erosion in purchasing power of money over a period of time. If one puts a lakh of rupees in a safety vault for say 5 years, then by the end of the 5 years its purchasing power would have declined by 20-30%. So one should not keep the funds idle. One should always look for an investment that gives a return over and above the inflation rate. Thus, inflation is an invisible robber. For the sake of brevity, we will not go into details here. B. Power of compounding. What is the power of compounding? Power of compounding is the ability of an investment to generate earnings not only on the original principal amount, but also on the accumulated interest already earned. To understand this, we need to understand the difference between simple interest and compound interest. Everyone must have heard these terms. These are two methods of calculating interest. In simple interest method, interest earned periodically is accumulated separately, whereas in compound interest method, interest earned is added back to the principal amount at the end of each period. This method gives superior returns to investors. From the table displayed, we can see that while 10,000 rupees becomes 25,000 rupees at an interest rate of 15% over a period of 10 years under simple interest method, the same becomes 40,456 rupees under compound interest method. Further from this graph, you can see how power of compounding works. Next important concept is life cycle planning. According to experts, an individual generally goes through 4 stages in life. They are starting phase, accumulation phase, consolidation phase, and retirement or distribution phase. The starting phase begins when the individual finishes the education and gets into a job or profession or starts a business. In this phase, the individual's main goal will be getting established in the chosen occupation. This period may last for about 10 years or so. The next phase is the accumulation phase. By the time the investor gets established in the chosen occupation, he/she may have got married and have a small family. By now, the individual may also have a clear picture about the future. This is the phase the investor goes for buying assets and building a portfolio of investments, if necessary by borrowing. This is the phase the individual sets goals for self and family. This phase may last for about 15-20 years. And then the next phase is the consolidation phase. In the consolidation phase, investors' attention would be more on family. Taking care of the family, children's education, and managing the investments already made, etc., will become top priorities. This phase may last for about 15-20 years. Then the last phase is the retirement phase. This is also called the distribution phase. By this time, the investor would have fulfilled the social commitments, would have realized the life goals. The children may have settled too. Now the investor looks forward to a peaceful retired life and starts planning about distribution of the wealth and possessions as per his or her choice. This process is also known as succession planning. Beyond finance. Beyond finance. Finance or wealth is only one aspect of life. Ideally, one should not live a unidimensional life. Ignoring other dimensions of life reduces its quality. After all, the ultimate goal of all beings is happiness. 1. Live a balanced life. Take care of all dimensions of life, viz., personal, professional, social, and spiritual. One should ideally lead a balanced life. 2. Health is wealth. This may be an old adage but ever valid. Adopt a healthy lifestyle with proper exercise, balanced diet, with sufficient entertainment, relaxation. 3. Stop comparing. One should never compare oneself with others. What others possess is inconsequential. Comparing oneself with others is a very unhealthy habit. Be happy with what you have and work upon it. It, of course, does not mean that one should not be ambitious. 4. Self-acceptance. Corporates and their marketing teams are there to tempt you to buy things that you really do not need. They try to convince you that your life is not complete without their merchandise. Don't walk into their trap. Never derive your self-worth from the goods you possess. This is very important. Cultivate the habit of accepting yourself the way you are, with or without all that paraphernalia. 5. Have a hobby. Having a hobby like singing, playing a musical instrument, or even rock climbing, if you are a fitness freak, makes one more creative. It is also said to be a great stress buster. 6. Work hard and work smart. One is not a substitute for another. Both are important. 7. Get involved in some service activity. If you like it. For many people, social service activities bring joy. There are many NGOs working on different themes like rural development, eco-conservation, etc. Think about it.
Thank you.